Hi everybody, TheHande here, and welcome back to the Leaders of Finland series, and today I thought I'd talk about Finnish political assassination. Now, what a political assassination is, of course, is when someone is murdered because of some political motivations. Usually, people talk about political assassinations, they're talking about someone in a position of political power. And although Finland has had some periods of political instability, such as during the early 70s with the rise of the political left, or during the Finnish Civil War, there have actually not been too many political assassinations in Finland. In fact, there have only really been two significant political assassinations in Finnish history. One that all the kids learn about in school, and another one which most Finns probably don't even know about. And something that which is either kind of funny or at least darkly ironic is that the more important one in most people's minds happened before Finland was even its own country. So in this video I thought I'd talk about Finland's two infamous political assassinations. Now, the more famous assassination in Finnish history happened in 1904 and was the assassination of Finland's Governor General Nikolai Bobrikov. Now, at this point, Finland was not its own independent country. We were instead an autonomous duchy in the Empire of Russia. And the reason Finland became an autonomous duchy in the Empire of Russia was because during the Napoleonic Wars, Russia yoinked Finland from Sweden, but then realized that they couldn't really waste too many resources governing every minute detail of Finnish life, so instead they decided to give Finland limited autonomy, which was kind of a great deal for Finns because it kind of allowed us to practice being our own country before we would eventually become that. However, in the turn of the 20th century, the once benevolent rule of the Tsars gave way to something known as Russification. In Finland, this was known as the Age of Oppression, and it was started by Tsar Nicholas II. What Russification entailed was Russia breaking down Finland's National Assembly, the Finnish Senate, which, as I've discussed before, was the precursor to the Finnish government. And during 1904, Russia also gave dictatorial powers to Finland's Governor General, Bobrikov. Now, this did not sit well with a certain university student by the name of Eugen Schauman, who decided to put an end to it and shot Bobrikov several times before then shooting himself. Bobrikov actually survived the initial shooting, only dying the following day. And the assassination itself had a very mixed reception, even though Finns were not happy with Russification. Many of them were not also really happy with Schauman's violent acts. But the reason the assassination is significant is because it's kind of seen as the violent climax of the Finnish resistance under the Russification era. The thing that finally did end up ending Russification, at least for a little while, was a general strike that happened not long afterwards, as well as the Russo-Japanese War. Unfortunately, after the Russo-Japanese War, Russia would resume Russification until the outbreak of World War I, after which they were going to have a whole lot of different problems to worry about. Alright, so that's the more famous assassination. The less famous one happened during the 1920s, and as you can probably guess from that, it had a little something to do with Finland eventually becoming its own country. And this is the assassination of Heikki Ritavuori, who was the Minister of Interior in Venola's second government. In 1922, he was shot at the doorstep of his apartment building by a Swedish-speaking Finnish national by the name of Ernst Tändefelt. And although convicted of the crime, Tändefelt's motivations for killing Ritavuori were so puzzling and so bizarre that the investigation ended up being reopened several more times over the next few decades. Basically, not long after Finnish independence, Finland was gripped by a civil war, and after our first president, Stolberg, was elected into power, one of the first things that he did was to pardon all of the Finnish prisoners of war, the Red Guard members, who were basically being imprisoned for treason, and the reason he did this was because he wanted to end the bloodshed and the political divide between Finnish citizens. However, in the eyes of many people on the political right, this immediately marked him and other people in his party, the Liberal Party, as being communist sympathizers, which was kind of ironic because they really weren't. Tändefelt said in his statements that the reason he shot Ritavuori was because Ritavuori was involved in some kind of nefarious conspiracy to sell out Finland to the Soviet Union. Now, not only was this conspiracy theory complete bwak, the main thing about it that was pretty obvious was that Tändefelt had really bought into this idea from extreme right newspapers that were disparaging people like Ritavuori who were associated with Stolberg. Also, there's the simple fact that Tändefelt did not know Ritavuori personally, nor vice versa. And the police even believed for a little while that TheHande had actually assassinated Ritavuori as a part of a elaborate conspiracy involving other extreme right members. TheHande made this theory very popular because in 1927 he made a public letter in which he named several members of what he believed were part of this conspiracy. But after the police investigated all the possible leads, they came to the conclusion that TheHande was just talking out of his ass. And although the people he named were also extreme right advocates, none of them were aware or at least in any way directly involved with TheHande's actions. TheHande, for his own part, spent the next 8 years in prison and then another 18 years in a mental hospital, and he finally passed away in 1948. Ritavuori's post in the Venla government was taken over by Heimo Helminen for a few months before the government collapsed. And what makes this second assassination so sad is not just the fact that most people really don't even remember it, but was the fact that it didn't really accomplish anything. Technically, the Proberkov assassination didn't end Finnish Russification either, but it was kind of an important historical landmark in the greater tradition of the Finnish nationalism, whereas the Ritavuori assassination was just a regrettable tragedy that had no rhyme or reason behind it. I'm Hannu TheHande Mäkinen. See you on the next one.